Pittsburgh Steelers fans, welcome back to another episode of the Steelers Burning Question. This is Behind the Steel Curtain Deputy Editor Dave Schofield coming at you this week. It's around 3:40 in the afternoon for those of you tuning in live. We are trying to get this squeezed in here today. So those of you that are interested in watching some playoff football, we will make sure we get done out and out of here, hopefully by kickoff, or if not, soon after. Which kind of raises a little bit of a separate question that maybe I'll ask there. I don't know how those of you feel about it. About how do you feel about the playoffs and everything now with the Steelers season being over? There's those of you out there that are like, hey, the Steelers are done. I'm done. I'm not worried about football again until next year. You know what? That's good and that's great, and I totally respect that. But then we have some other people that are like me, that it's NFL football and I'm going to watch, I'm going to tune in. It just royally sucks that the Steelers aren't playing. Oh, and I just saw that come up in the live chat. Solarverse6 feels the same way. It stinks that the Steelers are not playing today. You know, it'd be great if the Steelers weren't playing because they were on bye, but we haven't had that with the Steelers for a couple seasons now. Yes, that's the thing. I really wish the Steelers were playing today, but they're not. I'm still going to tune in. I'm still going to watch all the games. I'm kind of want to see what's going on. I'm glad that we got some people rolling in here into the live chat. If you were one of the people that are catching this later on, either on YouTube or on as a podcast, please make sure that you can go in and give us either that thumbs up or that star or whatever it is rating that that you can use depending on what platform you're using. It really helps us out. That's the thing that you can do first and foremost to help the show, and we appreciate that. I brought up a question this time because out of those of us that are involved with Behind the Steel Curtain, specifically those of us that do the podcasts, I'm the one who's got the experience playing as an offensive lineman and coaching coaching the offensive line. So, of course, a lot of the times that I watch football, I do a lot of critique of the offensive line. And the offensive line took some heat this year. They took some heat for their play. It's interesting because it depends on who you talk to as to whether or not you feel that the O-line was good, was not good. I think the overall consensus was the offensive line was not as good in 2019 as it was in 2018. I would agree with that. I think most people would agree with that. If you look at how the team ranked as a team, according to the Pro Football Focus rankings, I was kind of surprised to see that they had the Steelers ranked 9th. I did not think they would rank that high. Now, some of you might put a lot of stock in those rankings, and some of you might not put that much stock in those rankings at all. I know with a couple weeks left in the season, at least, Marquise Pouncey was ranked as like the 36th center in the NFL. And yes, there are only 32 teams. So you're talking about players that had to fill in for other players that would be there. Now, I don't know if that ranking was true or not. Meaning if you feel that is accurate and the 9th overall was accurate, it's kind of hard for me to believe that the whole line could be ranked as 9th, but yet one of the anchors of that line was ranked in the 30s. So I don't know. And I'm not going to go through and look at each person and critique them and their rankings and stuff individually. That's something we'll look at more, probably more in the off season when some more of that data becomes available. And frankly, I don't have more time to dive into it. But there were some differences this year. Number one difference that everyone knows is that the Steelers offensive line coach moved on. It was kind of an emotional thing for a lot of Steeler fans. They were hoping that Munchak would not get the head coaching job in Denver, that the Steelers would be able to keep Mike Munchak. But even though he didn't get the head coaching job, he still went to Denver as their offensive line coach. And the Steelers, within hours, if even putting the S on that. It could have been within the hour. Had promptly promoted the assistant offensive line coach, Sean Surrett, up to the offensive line coach, and then they brought in another assistant line coach, Clem. I think it's Adrian Clem, if I can remember his first name right. I know his last name's Clem. And that was their setup for the year. Now, a lot of people, because of the play of the offensive line, wanted to say, boy, oh boy, do we miss Munchak. Boy, do we miss Munchak. And part of a bigger question that I wanted to do with this burning question was, this is just something, and I'm posing these questions. I don't necessarily have the answers for these questions because everyone can give their opinions, but we don't really know exactly what it is because there's a lot of different factors. I actually asked Brian Anthony Davis this question, and he says, that's interesting. I said, yeah, I'm going to save that for a burning question. And here was the thing. Did Mike Munchak leave the Steelers when he did because we know it was the whole issue of being closer to family? It was better for his wife to be around his grandchildren if they were in Denver. Or did the offensive line take a step back because Mike Munchak left? Or did Mike Munchak leave because he saw the writing on the wall of what the Steelers' offensive line was becoming? Isn't that, I don't know if you really thought about that. And you're like, no, what do I mean by that? Okay, here we go. First things first, let's look at the 5 starting offensive linemen. Let's look at their ages currently, okay? You have Marquise Pouncey is 30. You have David DeCastro, who is 30, but he turns 31 next week. You have Ramon Foster, who is 34, who will be turning 35 on Tuesday. So he's another one next week that will be, DeCastro might even be the week after. It's in January. Okay. The young guy on the offensive line, Matt Filer, who is 27, and Alejandro Villanueva, who is 31. Now, these guys are getting up there a little bit, and the Steelers have not been reinvesting a whole lot into their offensive line. Now, they did draft Chuks Okorafor in the 3rd round the year before last. They had a 3rd round pick wrapped up with Gerald Hawkins the year before. I think it was the year before, or either 1 or 2 years before that. Pretty sure it was the year before, who he dealt with some injuries. The Steelers got a 7th round pick back for him, not in this draft, but in next year's draft, because they were probably going to be cutting him loose. Did Munchak see that these guys were getting older and thought, we might be on the downhill side. I've got an opportunity to go somewhere else. It's all coming together all at once. Everyone still thinks he's the greatest offensive line coach in the league, which I agree. But before things start to go downhill, maybe it's time to go start somewhere else. So I'm not saying this is true. I'm just bringing this out there as a question because maybe he saw the age of the offensive line going up. Okay. I'm not really looking at the live chat right now, but I did see someone say that it's most likely a combination of a lot of things. Okay. Money, family, writing on the wall. Michael O'Malley, good job. I don't have my thing to click on that right now to bring it up, but I'm going to bring up a lot of different things with the offensive line. And I think that it's a lot of different things that happened with the offensive line. Yes, Surrett has actually been with the Steelers. He was with the Steelers longer than Munchak. He was an assistant offensive line coach before Munchak, actually took over as the offensive line coach during the season before they got Mike Munchak. He wasn't officially given that job. He was the offensive line coach. I can't even remember his name now because I blocked it out of my memory. They brought him in for 1 year. It was halfway through the year. He was obviously not getting the job done. The Steelers don't fire people midseason. I know people ask for coaches to get fired midseason. It doesn't happen. Even this guy that was that bad, they just took away all his duties and gave him to Surrett. And he stuck around to the end of the year and they let him go. That's what they did. So Surrett's been around a long time. I don't know that I'm going to lay totally at his feet. Okay. Granted, he's not Mike Munchak, but is anyone going to be Mike Munchak? That's another good question. So that's a factor involved. So there's probably multiple factors with Munchak leaving. Munchak not being here was probably one of the factors. I think age with this offensive line, big factor. Even though David DeCastro doesn't have as many years as Marquise Pouncey, they're actually both the same age with DeCastro's birthday coming before Pouncey's because Pouncey came out a year early. So they haven't really been investing. When I say a high draft pick, I think of ones and twos. Your ones and twos are your starters, and your threes are guys that you hope work out and contribute. Starter maybe, but not necessarily. Steelers have done a nice job of finding some great third round starters like Deontay Johnson, like Javon Hargrave. I'm sure there's a lot more we could throw out there, but those are the two on the top of my head right now, and I don't want to spend forever on it. But that's one thing with the offensive line. But let's see, did the offensive line have as bad of a year as what we thought? Well, Pro Football Focus had them ranked 9th. But going into the season, they had them, I'm pretty sure they were ranked second. If not second, they were third. They were up there pretty high. So they obviously did not achieve as well as what they were projected. But there's a couple different stats you can look at to say, let's see how they did with this. Now, it helps you to show the offensive line play, but it's still not completely on the offensive line. And I understand that. And we'll break this down a little bit. For example, if you want to look at sacks, how many times the quarterback was sacked? The Steelers gave up 32 sacks this year. That was the most since 2015 when they gave up 33. Now, was that all on the offensive line? No. Because obviously, if your quarterback's standing back there holding the ball, not getting rid of it, taking intentional grounding calls, which don't count as sacks, but still, Steelers had a lot of them this year. It's a big factor in it. It's not the only factor, but a large factor. Okay, 32 in 2019, 24 in 2018. So they gave up 8 more sacks this past season. That's basically a half a sack a game. Quick math, wasn't it? They gave up 24 in 2017 as well. And in 2016 is when they had their low of 21 sacks given up. So they took a jump up in that respect. Now, what's interesting is if you want to look at it, and this might be why the Steelers are ranked where they are by Pro Football Focus, is that the Steelers were 9th in the NFL with the least number of sacks given up. That's where they ranked. Now, the year before, with the 24 sacks, they were 4th in the NFL. So they saw that fell back some, but like I say, that's also some on the quarterbacks. Okay. The next thing that I want to talk about, and you can say this has to do with the offensive line. It does to a degree, but then I'm also going to tell you why there's still a star next to this one as to whether or not this is it. How about rushing attempts of 0 yards or less? Meaning where a running back was tackled for no gain or a loss on the play. I almost expanded to just 1 yard, but I didn't want to do that. I just left it at this. The Steelers had 41 rushes this past season of 0 yards or less on a play that was deemed a rushing play. So sacks don't come into this one. They had at least 1 rush of no gain or worse in every game this season except one. And that one game was against the Baltimore Ravens at Heinz Field in Week 5, a game where the Steelers actually out-averaged the Ravens rushing the ball, but they only ran the ball 19 times. Now, granted, that was a little bit inflated because when he came in after Rudolph was injured, Devlin Hodges had a 21-yard run, which really did help that average some. But they only rushed the ball 19 times, and the Ravens rushed it over 40. So that's that. Now, if you want to compare that to last year, I didn't go back to all the years. I just went back to last year. They had 23 rushes of 0 yards or less. So that was almost double in a year. Now, but once again, you can say, well, that's on the offensive line. But you also got to look at this offensive line and the spot that they were put in. When Ben Roethlisberger went out, what did defenses do? Defenses loaded the box, dared the Steelers to throw the ball and beat them. Now, I'm not saying they did it all the time, and I see that Flip's on here. Flip actually might have some better, like an estimate of that even than me from his film breakdown as to how often the Steelers faced a stacked box. You know, just in general, not an exact number this year versus last year, and especially with the young quarterbacks they had. I'm just going from what it felt like when you watch the game. It felt like they were going up against multiple defenders in the box way more than they ever did when Ben Roethlisberger was the quarterback. So when you're talking about putting multiple, a high number of players in the box, you're going to have more guys there than what you could really realistically block. So you're trying to block guys, but there's more guys there to block than what you have guys to block them. That's why sometimes scheme could really help. And I was critical a lot of times when they kept using the jumbo package and bringing in Zach Banner. Nothing against Zach Banner. I thought he did a great job. But when they brought him in, they were telling the other teams, hey, we're running. But if the other teams were loading up the box anyway, whether or not they were in that formation or not, you might as well have another blocker there to try to take out another guy or two. So I still think that the Steelers could have done more to get to, how do you say, loosen up that box based on their personnel and their formations. But it just didn't seem like it happened well enough to where they were constantly getting people out of the box because the quarterback play was not at a level to make teams pay for that. So I feel that when it comes to the offensive line, I don't think they performed as well this year as they had in years past. It didn't seem like they were often getting a good push of moving the entire line of scrimmage down the field. It was more about opening up holes. And that seems a lot of times that almost seemed like the Steelers scheme, that they know that they're more of a finesse and athletic offensive line, more than a power offensive line. So rather than push you, they're going to try to out scheme you and turn you and outmaneuver you by pulling your guards and pulling your center and doing things like that in order to get the blockers where they need them to be. Because as much as you want to complain about how he might have had a rough year with Marquise Pouncey, he's one of the few centers in the league that can pull the way he does. Okay. That's kind of what he does. And he's able to do that. And that's what the Steelers would miss if they did not have Pouncey out there. So I think we could kind of agree that the offensive line was not quite to the level that they have been in years past. To me, to answer this question, I'm going to say they're getting a little bit older. They need to get some more, start revamping things. If you look at it by his post-game interview after week 17, Ramon Foster basically knows that the Steelers are going to move on from him, but based on his age, his performance, and his contract. Those three killer things. I mean, I love myself some Big Ragu. I'd love to see him stick around for forever, but the one thing that no one can ever escape is the aging process. I know sometimes quarterbacks and kickers can play out there a long time, but they're not playing the physical game that the other players are playing. So that's just what happens. Age catches up to everyone. And I'd be really sad to see Ramon Foster in another uniform. But at the same time, I don't think the Steelers can keep him as a reserve player for the contract that he has right now. And that's just what it is. So maybe looking to get a little bit younger across the offensive line could maybe help for next year. So I think that was part of their problem, is just overall age there. And then I think it was really tough with the situation they were put in, that it was really tough to run the ball. And honestly, to protect your quarterback when they could send extra guys, because teams did not respect the Steelers quarterbacks to make them pay. Why else do you think a team like Miami, who said they didn't have any regrets, sent everybody on that famous play just before the half of that Monday night game in week 8 for the Steelers to get back in that game before halftime? Because they honestly didn't trust. They thought that if you sent enough people, they were kept sending more and more people because the quarterbacks couldn't respond to it. And they finally did there and made them pay, because Miami, everyone knows, Miami took it too far with that one. They took that one a little bit too far. So that was part of it, is that I felt that the offensive line had more people coming at them than what they could handle, and it made for a tough situation. So I don't think they're a lost cause. I don't think that Sean Surratt is not a good coach. I think that the Steelers just need to continue to cycle in some better and younger players, because you don't just want to be complacent with your offensive line that they're good, because as soon as you sit back and you're happy with it, next thing you know, there's a big drop-off. And hopefully they can get better quarterback play next season to where the offensive line can do the things that they're better at. Honestly, Ben Roethlisberger helps make that offensive line better. It's just how it is. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to finally I don't know if I even spelled it right, to look for anyone who wants to throw out their opinion of answering this question with the offensive line. I've not been looking at the live chat up until now. It's maybe a glance or two. But if you specifically want to answer the question or state anything about the offensive line, now's a good time. Also, if you really want to fire out a question there, especially kind of along the same lines, now would be a great time to do it. So, Flip, I'll be honest with you. When I asked you if you had any idea about that with the box, I didn't get to look at the live chat before now. So if you put it out there, maybe you could put it out there again for me, which would be really helpful. But if you have any other questions like that, you also have the super chat feature. If you really want to use it, don't feel like you need to. I'm not on here begging for money. But if you want to just type in anything as your chat, just type in your question or your statement or whatnot. I said not anything, keep it appropriate. And then hit the $sign down at the bottom. Donate any amount you want to the show. I will guarantee that I will answer your question or bring up your statement. So here we go. I'm going to now look over here. Ron said, Dave, exactly. It's quarterback play that's all the difference. I'm not going to say all the difference, but I'm going to say a much bigger difference than what a lot of people realize. A much bigger difference than a lot of people realize. And I think if I'm going to put these things in order, I'm going to say the quarterback play coupled with the age of the offensive line didn't allow them to make up for the poor quarterback play that they might have been able to do 3 seasons ago. But that's a huge factor. Here we go. Ali's brought up something interesting. He said, I think when one player doesn't do his job, it doesn't help that Pouncey has to take on Ramon's block. That's a really good point. That's the one thing when it comes to an offensive line is that's a cohesive unit. And you have to be able to trust the guy next to you to do the job that they're going to do for you to do the job that you're going to do. So I don't know how often that really happened in there, but that's a very good point that there's times when you have to help bring on with someone else's stuff. Okay. Oh, my chat just skipped. So Michael agreed. He said Ben does make the O-line better. I agree. I say specifically Ben because Ben is our franchise quarterback. Great quarterback play will allow an offensive line to be better. But sometimes if your offensive line play is that bad, your great quarterback play doesn't even come into play because he's back there running for his life. So that's one thing that the Steelers did not do this year. I do not feel that the quarterback was constantly. I mean, I watched that game on Monday night, which was the Minnesota Vikings hosting. Well, I don't know if it was hosting or not. I think it was hosting the Green Bay Packers when Kirk Cousins was back there, and Zadarius Smith just went off in that game. And he had no time to ever throw a pass. It was rare that he actually had time to go back and throw a pass. That was not the situation with the Steelers this year. So here's another one. Lifelong fan, a commitment to running was not emphasized. That's true. And I still feel that was the decision that really brought down the Steelers' postseason hopes was the decision to drop back 42 times and attempt 38 passes against the Buffalo Bills. Even though Coach Tomlin says that was inflated because they were losing, those numbers were inflated some, but they still weren't running the ball. They were still passing more than running throughout the entire game. And that's one thing, even though the Bills were losing, they didn't give up on the run. And that's why they won the game. So, yeah, I know it says comment. I know you meant commitment. I got you lifelong on there. Flip, thanks for answering. He says he has no idea, but that would be great to see, though. That's something, I might have to try to see if I can find out how often did the Steelers go against a stacked box this year, because that's a good question. Unless you go back and look at the tape yourself, you're probably not going to be able to find someone else that really has that. Nubian Soldier says he thinks that the offensive line really missed Coach Munchak. I'm not saying that wasn't part of the equation. I just don't know if that was the end all be all of what was going on, like some people do. I know I got a couple super chats coming up. Solarverse asked a good question though that I really want to bring up first. He said, should they consider moving Pouncey to guard and either draft a center or re-sign Finney? I will be honest with you. If if you're looking at BJ Finney taking over that job, because they'd have to re-sign him. If they're looking at BJ Finney to fill in, I still think Finney plays better at guard than he does center. That's just me personally. So if Pouncey was still going to be around, I would still say Pouncey would be center. There was a time, I can't remember. I think it was it 2 years ago? Might have been 3 years ago, before Big Al had really stepped in and stepped up and had the left tackle locked in. The Steelers were dealing with a lot of injuries, and Coach Tomlin said, you were really close to seeing Marquise Pouncey play tackle, because they didn't have anyone else to go play tackle. He would have bumped out because they still had another interior lineman. So here, let's get to the Super Chat questions. We got Snowman, $5 into the tip jar. Thank you very much, Snowman. Long-time commenter. He says, do the Steelers address the offensive line problem in this year's draft? And he says he loves the hat. Well, I have a lot of different hats going on, and people are giving me a hard time about my Juju hat. I'm still going to keep wearing it. I think they have to address offensive line. The problem is, what's interesting is this. I don't regret the Steelers not having a first-round pick next year. They have an all-pro player with their 2020 first-round draft pick. How many teams can guarantee an all-pro player with their 2020 draft pick? None. How many of them can guarantee that going into any draft? No. That's what you got for this year's pick, and you still have him for 3 more years after this one. I am A-okay with that trade. That is fantastic. That was a great job. Just remember, Ben Roethlisberger has never been first-team All-Pro, because there's always been another quarterback that's got it ahead of him. So it really depends on a lot of different things. Minkah Fitzpatrick will always be a first-team All-Pro NFL player. End of story. That is something, that is a label that will follow him for the rest of his life. So that's what the Steelers got. The problem is the Steelers are going to have to be very particular with how they draft this year, because you look at needs, but everything's pushed back. So it depends on what happens with Bud Dupree, or how bad they need an outside linebacker. It depends on other things going on. I would love to get an offensive lineman there, especially in round 2. But I don't know that that's going to be in the cards for the Steelers. It's going to be very, very, very different this year when it comes to what the Steelers could draft. I think they're going to have to address the offensive line at some point in the draft, or they're going to have to do something with free agency with it, and maybe a little bit of both. But it is something that is going to have to be addressed this year. Okay. I just skipped again, and I don't want to miss my super chats. So here we go. Kathy Ford, another longtime commenter. He says, value BJ Finney. What round? Well, BJ Finney, if you're asking about what round he was drafted, BJ Finney is like a lot of the Steelers offensive linemen. He was undrafted. The Steelers, of their, let's just say this, of the 8 offensive linemen that the Steelers had this year for every game, I'm counting Marquise Pouncey, only 3 of them were drafted by the Steelers. You had a first-round pick in Marquise Pouncey, a first-round pick in David DeCastro, and a third-round pick in Chuks Okorafor. Zach Banner was not, I'm trying to remember, he's the one I can't remember if he was drafted by someone else and cut, or if he was undrafted and was someone else, and then the Steelers got him. I'm not 100% sure with him. You all might know and can help me out. All the other guys with the Steelers offensive line, undrafted guys. Ramon Foster, undrafted. Matt Filer, undrafted. Alejandro Villanueva, undrafted. All of them. That the Steelers have found and turned into viable offensive linemen. BJ Finney, undrafted. I still love the story with BJ Finney when he told his family that after he wasn't drafted, that he signed with the Steelers. If you've never seen that, you got to be able to go back and look that up somewhere. That was fantastic. So the Steelers are going to have to do something there. They've done a nice job with those undrafted guys for a long time. But I don't know how much you can continue to count on that. Okay. So people still want to know, do we draft a quarterback in the draft? My answer is No, because if you're drafting a quarterback in this year's draft, you are just drafting another body. And if you're just drafting another body, you can find another body, because the answer for the Steelers is not going to be in this draft, most likely, unless something crazy happens. Because then if something crazy happens, you roll with it when it happens. But that's not something I would look at. I know I'm a little bit behind now with you guys, so I'm going to try to catch up a little bit. Flip threw us out something. He says he saw Pouncey helping out DeCastro a lot more. Didn't quite understand that. I'm not sure. That could have been based on blocking scheme, or was DeCastro struggling? I don't know. That's some good stuff to go back and look at. That's something that I've got to see if I can, because I don't have access to the games. I've got to maybe get one of those accounts to go back and break down each of the games, maybe more in the offseason, and to look at some of the offensive line play. Because right now the only game I have to look at is week 17, and I don't really want to go look at that one to break it down, because I don't try to break down things. I mean, I look a little bit during the game, but especially with my responsibilities now with the site, I don't. Even if I have the game on DVR, I don't always have time to go back and break down every little thing like I have in the past. So, so here we go. Big Marv says thinks Banner needs to play a bigger role this coming season. Okay, but thinks that, like, just like me, you like Foster, but he's on the decline. It's just how it is. So that's what it is. So let's see. I had one I wanted to bring up. It was Ron again. He said, "Do I think that 2 4th-round picks in the can we draft 2 good offensive linemen to develop?" That's another factor that, well, we're not necessarily ready to factor in, is how much did Mike Munchak help in identifying the collegiate talent for the Steelers to draft and to sign as free agents and undrafted free agents. I don't know. Could there be 2 good 4th-round picks? Because the Steelers do have 2 4th-round picks this year, because they got Miami's as well. So they'll have some picks back to back, because they'll be picking at the very end of the 3rd round. That's the projected compensatory draft pick that is still not definite. There was an interesting article out on that I'm gonna break down for BehindTheSteelCurtain.com, your one-stop shop for all your Pittsburgh Steelers needs. Make sure you're checking it out every day. Plenty of articles and content coming out even throughout the offseason. But honestly, Ron, it's going to depend on who's there and what the Steelers think they have with it there. I never want the Steelers to reach. I never want them to reach for a player just because, I have a pick now. He's not the right pick now, but who knows if we'll be able to get him later. You got to get who's available and take the best players available. But you don't want to necessarily draft a lineman in the 4th round with your last pick, because you don't have a 5th-round pick, and you won't draft again until the 6th round, and you draft the bottom of the 5th-round guy in the 4th round, only because you won't have a chance to pick again until the 6th round. That's the kind of, I know that that was a lot of talking around that. I don't know if you all followed that or not, but that's just one thing I don't want to see the Steelers do. And I always got to trust that they know a lot more than I do. I didn't know anything about drafting Deontay Johnson as high as they did. That was the first question I asked Jeff Hartman, and Brian Anthony Davis still gives me a hard time about it when I said, did they need to take him there? But the more research I did after the fact, the more I realized, yes, they did. And now he's a 2nd-team All-Pro as a punt returner. So Paul said, that's true. That's what we said. Quarterbacks holding the ball too long. The line can't block forever. That's a stat I'm going to have to look up at some point this offseason, is snap to throw times from years past versus this year. That'll be interesting. I'm trying to see if I can catch up anymore. Yep. Then I'm catching some other stuff where you guys were referring back to things that we were talking about. Okay. We've got questions like, here we go. Mark says, should the Steelers look at Mariota as a vet backup if available? It's a possibility. I would not mind the Steelers bringing in an experienced person to either be the 2 or the 3. I always loved when they had like a Gradkowski. And of course, Charlie Batch. I mean, no one even needs to mention that Charlie Batch, he's the all-time great Steeler backup quarterback for his role with the team. It was fantastic. But we don't know if that's a situation that some of these quarterbacks want to come into and what kind of salary they would be looking at. So there's a lot of questions. It's nice to just say, oh, we could go get so-and-so, but you got to have the money. It's got to be the right fit for the player as well. So just like lifelong fans said, Eli could be a backup, but Eli already said he hated being a backup this year. He does not want to be locked into a backup role. And anyone who comes to the Steelers for 2020, unless something changes in the next several months with his rehabilitation, anyone who comes in now to be a quarterback, you're talking about 2-3 on the depth chart. End of story. So here we go. Yeah. Someone it jumped again on me. Sorry guys. I had a good one. Didn't jump that far because now I'm back to stuff. Tom said this. This is what I want to say. He said, I just hope they pick right and not reach, like all the draft gurus always say, and that's the most of their guys were always cut. Yeah, I just want to say that don't reach. Don't reach. don't reach. Flip answered the question with the quarterbacks. Where are we coming up with that money? Exactly. So, I don't think he's interested in it, but yeah, a lot of people said this. Charlie Batch for quarterbacks coach. I think the Steelers need to have a definite assigned quarterback coach for this year. That was just too much to ask. Randy Land. Okay. Lance brings up another good number to talk about. Leading rusher had less than 500 yards for the Steelers. Okay. Is that because of the offensive line, or is that because the injuries and the lack of continuity with the running back situation? So once again, that sometimes raises more questions than gives answers. So we are getting probably within, what are we, maybe 15 minutes away from kickoff of our NFL playoff games. If there's any other questions here, make sure you wait. I saw one and then it skipped away on me again. So, but I will find it, I'm sure. Here we go. Solarverse. That's what it was. He said, are you concerned with the lack of information on Ben's injury? I'm going to say no, because the reason you don't have information on his injury is because his injury has to heal before he can throw. And sometimes it just takes time for all the healing and everything to go on after surgery. You can't just instantly know, oh, you'll be able to do this, you'll be able to do that, you'll be able to do this. They can't do much with it yet. They can't do anything with it yet. And sometimes it's frustrating and whatnot. My daughter fractured her arm. When was that? In the middle of December. And she just had a doctor's appointment yesterday. She's not actually even in a cast anymore because of stuff. But she's still not allowed to do any kind of sports or whatnot because you don't push it yet. And they say, if you try to push it and say, oh, let me see if I can do this, you're going to hurt yourself in the long run. They just are trusting her. Don't do it. Just don't do it until we say to do it. And that's kind of the deal is with Ben, that we will. The thing is, will they tell us anything when they do know? Snowman, agree. We need more coaches, period. I think they do need to add several more coaches to the staff. Okay. Lance wants to know, and I'd like to know this too. Will BJ Finney get re-signed? It depends on what kind of contract he's looking for. I think, especially if you move on from Ramon Foster, I think Finney's a good fit that could answer the question, maybe not long-term, but at least temporarily for a season or so. At the guard position, I think he's done a nice job for the Steelers. One thing that I have pointed out, though, is when he plays center versus Marquise Pouncey, there are athletic plays that Marquise Pouncey can make that BJ Finney just isn't quite as quick as Pouncey. That's just how he is. So it's just one of those things just to remember. So, and why does this keep skipping on me? That's all right. We'll figure it out here. So, that is the ultimate question, Braden. That's the ultimate question, is how much will BJ ask for? How much is Finney going to be looking to get? So I think he could be an important piece with the Steelers. He was a Steeler fan his whole life. It'd be nice to see him stay. But at the same time, if someone's going to give him a whole lot more than what he thinks the Steelers, if he thinks, let's just say this, the Steelers are going to work on signing him before free agency starts. That they're going to do that with a lot of their guys. So then you have to ask yourself, what do I think I can bring on the open market? And do I want to stay with the Steelers, or do I want to go with what they offer me? Because you can always get there and you get that open market, and it's a guessing game, and that market's not there as much as you think. And then you got to take whatever you can get. Just ask Mr. Butt Naked Get Robbed, who did not get nearly either of the deals that he turned down from the Steelers. So that's just sometimes you gamble and you lose. That's just kind of how it was. So here we go. Want to make sure I'm gonna bring this up. Joel Beckman wants to know, Dave, since the Steelers are done, should I take down Christmas lights or watch the Texans game? Okay. This is coming from in Dallas, Texas. Well, you're not like me. It's kind of wet and rainy where I live right now, so I'm not messing with Christmas lights outside. I don't know. It really depends on how invested you are in NFL football. Really, you can't go wrong either way. If you really don't want to watch because it's not the Steelers, I would not fault you one bit. We started the show off saying that. Okay. And then, of course, Lance keeps firing up all kinds of questions that aren't about what we're talking about, but it's a good question. Will the Steelers get 2 Hall of Famers in this year? Yes. The question is, will they get 3? Because they will get Donnie Shell and Troy Polamalu. The only question is, will you also get Alan Faneca? So, or will Polamalu or Faneca, and they could shock the world and have it be one and not the other, but that would just be, you're going to hear an awful lot if Polamalu doesn't get in this year. This is a great question that I don't have the answer for. Okay, who is someone like Finney's market value worth? That's something I'd have to look into and try to say, hey, what kind of stuff do we get there? I couldn't tell you. I don't know if anyone out there on the live chat could help out. I know Flip does a lot of salary cap stuff. He might have a better answer for that. I know in the past, Lance has sent me some stuff about it, of like with Bud Dupree, and when someone else signs a contract that would be more like an equivalent player and what they might be looking to get. So those are good questions. We're going to be talking more about the Steelers contract situations in weeks to come because it's the off season. That's the kind of stuff that we're going to mention. So it's a lot of stuff like that that's going to keep coming your way. We are not going anywhere. We're going to continue to bring you podcasts and all the great content on BehindTheSteelCurtain.com. As far as I know, our podcast lineup is remaining the same for now. We may see a change, and I don't think, and trust me, if it's a change, it's not going to be in a negative way. It's going to be in a positive way. That there might be some changing up to how we run shows or what we call shows or exactly when we schedule shows coming up in the next few weeks. I still have to hear from Jeff Hartman to see for sure exactly how it's going to go. If we're going to change some things up, adapt some things, or pretty much keep stuff the same. So make sure you stay tuned. But for now, this is where we're coming. The one thing I know that we're missing is that we don't have a post-game show on tomorrow. I don't know if Jeff's going to fill in with a different show. If you want to know, you've got to go into the YouTube channel, subscribe, and turn on your notifications. And then that way you will get the alert anytime that we're going live. It'll come right up on your phone and you can tune in. If you guys are like me and you know a show's coming up, I'll get on YouTube and start looking for it before I even get the notification. I know people do that because you all are sometimes in the live chat before the notification comes out. So I do know that we are scheduled, that as far as I know, we're scheduled to have a hangover on Monday. We'll have My Brothers on My Show on Tuesday. Standard's the Standard. I'm pretty sure it's still set for Wednesday. I'm assuming this is our lineup until we're told that it's not. And if it's not, it's because we're going to bring you something even better. So you got to trust in that. Hopefully, I saw earlier in the live chat, someone says that these podcasts help them get through the off season. Guess what? That's what we want to hear. That's what we want to hear, that we're just not out here doing these podcasts for ourselves, that we are a Steelers family. And right now, it's that rough stretch. and we're just starting that rough stretch. So let's stay together. Let's get through it together. We'll keep doing the podcast. We'll keep hanging out, and we'll get through this offseason, because before we know it, I know last year it seemed like that offseason was forever. And then next thing you know, we had football again. And then next thing you know, we're in the offseason again. So unfortunately, that's the way time goes. It'll come back around. But thank you all for tuning in. If you want to, go enjoy yourself some NFL playoff football. If you don't want to, because the Steelers aren't playing, go find something else great to do. If you don't know what else to do, go check out BehindTheSteelCurtain.com. And as Lance Williams says, tune in, tell a friend, and subscribe. We'll see you next time.